Well, good morning and welcome back to the Broadcast Retirement Network. I'm Jeff Snyder, and this is BRN Weekly for Saturday, February 1st, 2020. Earlier this week, I sat down with LinkedIn's Devin Banerjee to discuss artificial intelligence and whether more regulation could be on the way. Let's take a look.
Pretty interesting storyline coming out of Google and Alphabet. Its CEO, Sundar Pichai, coming out in a Financial Times op-ed calling for more thoughtful, more strict even regulation around artificial intelligence. So as you know, and everyone knows by now, AI is such a booming area. It holds so much promise for technological innovation and for technology to refine itself and to improve itself over time. And so, as I said, Sundar Pichai, Google and Alphabet is a company that is producing so much AI technology and doing so much innovation around there. And what Pichai came out and said is, if you think about over history, technological innovations like the internal combustion engine or the internet even, it facilitated so many great things, so much progress like travel and the spread of information, but it also came with total unforeseen in many cases risks and challenges. So, the engine, of course, it revolutionized travel, but it created this huge spike in deaths around car accidents. The internet, facilitated the spread of information, but also on the flip side, facilitated the spread of misinformation. And so he says regulation is really necessary if you think about it. Not enough people, he says, in the technology industry recognize or appreciate the role of regulation in the evolution of their industry. So he says AI is similar. There's the threat of deep fakes, people taking on the voice and the faces and the features of others, spreading misinformation, dangerous information. Other uses of facial technology like mass surveillance are very scary, very dangerous, especially if governments, authoritarian governments or non-democratic governments start to employ this technology. And so he says, quote, I love this quote, he says, companies such as ours cannot just build new technology and let market forces decide how it will be used. I mean, that's such a fascinating statement if you think about it, coming from one of the largest companies in the world, the CEO of one of the largest companies in the world, saying market forces are not enough to determine how their products, in this case technology, is used. And so I'll just step back and say that regulation is such a complex issue and it's very geographic in nature. So we are seeing already a divergence in how the US is thinking about potential AI regulation, how the European Union is thinking about it. The White House here in the US, at least this administration, has put forward a very light touch approach, trying to avoid overreach, trying not to hinder innovation. They would like to continue spurring innovation. On the flip side, the European Union has advocated for a more direct intervention approach, actually putting forward a 5-year ban on facial recognition. And so, again, this divergence in regulation just means more complexity for companies, international companies that are operating across borders. It means higher costs for them as they have to have different policy teams and approaches. And it basically permeates throughout their companies, all the way down to how the product is built and marketed. And so it's very costly when there's this divergent regulation. And so it's very top of mind, I would say, how AI will be regulated for technology executives right now. And for those in decision-making roles and executive roles, and for people on boards of directors and shareholders of companies, as I said, really right now, the conversation is around let's standardize things. Let's put down some principles on paper that can be applied across the industry, across regulatory agencies. Because going back to what I said, when policy diverges, it just creates, headaches and expense and complexity for companies, which, yes, the man on the street, doesn't really care about. But as I said, it really permeates these companies, increases costs and complexity. And like you said, you mentioned the California Privacy Act, you mentioned GDPR. These all take a different approach, and it just creates complexity for companies, and in some cases, complexity for consumers. So, but it was interesting. I think what Sundar Pichai is saying is, let's just have this wider conversation about principles. Let's agree on fundamental principles. He actually advocated and came out and said, look, the EU is putting forward this ban on facial recognition. He thinks the US should do that as well, actually. As a matter of fact, Google does not sell its facial recognition technology externally. It's just developing it internally. And that is different from some of its peers and rivals like Microsoft and Amazon. So in a way, Google is trying to be a leader on this issue, actually, which is why you see with those jobs of the future rankings, including the ones that LinkedIn puts out, it's not just those software engineers who work on AI and stuff like that. It's people who can oversee the process of the creation of this technology, of the refining of this technology. It's product managers who also have soft skills like empathy and understanding. It's people who are skilled at user research and can see the effects of this technology. So, I mean, that has been now like a 20, 30-year arc of the technology industry, which is this realization that you can't just have people code this technology and create the software and then step back and put it out into the world. You have to have very perceptive and keen product managers and user engagement researchers and all of that around the software engineers.
And I also sat down with the Motley Fool's Dan Klein to discuss encryption of our personal devices and whether or not the government should have access. Let's take a look.
So the issue is, it's not that the government wants Apple or any technology company to just turn over your data willy-nilly. What they want is the ability to, when the government gets a warrant and you say, hey, I'm not telling you my password, I'm not giving you my fingerprint to get into my iPhone. They want Apple to build, Google to, Microsoft to, back doors into their technology where the company can then comply with that warrant and hand over the data. Now, as a company, you don't want to do that, but forgetting the legal piece of it, it's just the last thing you want to do as a trusted company is be telling people, I'm building in a back door to give your info for the government. Because the ways that can go wrong, we all know are countless. But on the law enforcement side, Jeff, do you watch Law & Order, any of the Law & Orders?
I used to, yeah. Law and Order Criminal Intent was my favorite. I don't think they produce that anymore.
They don't. So we watch all of them. I've seen every episode of all three main Law & Order series. And one of the key methods of finding the bad guy is they track their credit card hits. They get a warrant to know where their cell phone has pinged. So we are using invasive technology anyway. And I do believe that if the government gets a warrant, which is not an easy thing to do, to search your premises, then they have the right to see what's on your computer, to see what's on, and by not complying, you can make that not possible. And then they have to use different, forensic technology, and sometimes they can break it, and sometimes they can't. And an iPhone, they pretty much can't. There was a high-profile case not that long ago that showed that. So, but I do think there are other methods. If I have a warrant to look at the contents of your iPhone and you don't comply, well, that's contempt of court, and you go to jail. And you go to jail until you're willing to, but maybe you go to jail for 3 years and other evidence goes away. So it is a very tricky thing, but I don't think we should be forcing companies to be complicit in this. It is reasonable for me to think if my iPhone is secure, that it's secure, and that Apple can't, some wayward employee at Apple could be looking at my stuff. And I go back to, I worked for a technology company in the late 90s, a very big website. And one of our tech guys got fired because he was reading his girlfriend's emails and learned that she was perhaps seeing other people. Now, she shouldn't have been doing that, but he most certainly should not have been reading her emails. And there's no reason someone at Apple can't just decide, I'm bored, I'm going to see what pictures Jeff has on his phone. So we are sitting on sort of an ethical cliff. Yeah. Because we've all seen the movie Minority Report, where they use some sort of magic people to know you're going to commit a murder, and they arrest you before you commit the murder. Now, it is not inconceivable that we could use facial recognition, AI, other technology to go, okay, this guy over here, he's going to rob a bank, or he's a pedophile, or whatever it is. But can you punish people for crimes they haven't committed? Can you arrest someone, even if all you do is take away their ability to commit that crime? What is the ethics of figuring it out and then arresting them? Because the reality is there's probably some percentage of people that have some sort of terrible instinct. They want to murder, they want to punch everybody in the face, but somehow they figure out how to not do that. And that might be simply by locking themselves in their basement or yoga or whatever it is. So we've talked about this with all the cameras in Europe last week, that just because we know something's going to happen, preventing it in the act is great. Preventing it before the act, because we're pretty sure, isn't so great if you're the person who thought about committing a crime but didn't. And ideally, it should be opt-in. I allow Apple and Fitbit to see my health data because I want Apple to be able to do a huge study and say, Dan's 46, he can still lose a few pounds. I see his heart rate. I see his working out. Hey, Dan, maybe you should talk to your doctor about this potential problem because we've used our AI to figure out that people who look like your profile might have this issue. And you go to your doctor and you say, my health data suggests maybe I have this. Your doctor runs a test and says, no, your blood pressure's great, like keep working out. Or in my case, I have some knee issues. Maybe a year from now, I'll have sneakers that can tell me how to walk better or different things. Whatever it is, on an aggregate basis, I think that's very beneficial. On the other hand, there's some really sneaky AI being used out there. McDonald's uses a technology that when you go through the drive-thru, it could use the time of day and different AI, artificial intelligence, to suggest you menu items. And I guess that helps build up their sale. But I once was on a panel with one of the executives from Chick-fil-A, and he said we could do that. Like we could go in and pull up your face and know what your order is and tell you, hey, you had a shake last time, and this time we think you'd like this. But that's creepy, and we don't want to do it. And on some level, it is creepy. On the other hand, maybe McDonald's will suggest something that I wouldn't have tried that would be fabulous. So we all sort of have to balance. And the negative of the McDonald's instance is, as a consumer, you don't know what's happening. You don't know you're having a different menu board shown to you than the guy behind you. You don't know if that's based on your height, your weight, your whatever. It could be simply based on the weather and have nothing to do with you. So a lot of that stuff that isn't optional, that we're being exposed to, is a bit scary. In terms of crime, you absolutely want police to have aggregate data so they can have a sense of, okay, we saw an abnormal number of this thing bought, that those are bomb-making supplies. We can triangulate what's going on, but you can't show up to your house just because you look a certain way and think a certain way and go, well, we think you're going to commit a crime 3 years from now. So I was at Money 2020 this year, which we've talked about, and I was amazed that almost every company I talked with, and I'm talking all the big banks, Intuit, were talking about taking information you willingly gave them. I want to buy a house in 5 years, my kid's going to go to college, and using that to recommend financial products for you on a pretty agnostic basis. It's really truly finding the best things for you, or telling you, hey, look, you want to buy that house, but if you buy that house, you're not going to meet that goal. So these things are going to benefit us in some pretty strong ways, but it's important to know what's happening, and it's important to be a little bit skeptical. If you were logged into your bank and your bank is recommending, a retirement saving plan for you, that might be an option, but make sure you check with an impartial source who might say, yeah, that's good, but there's 3% fees on that, and you can get one with 1% fees or no fees. So trust but verify.
And when we come back, bad broker behavior in Delaware. Is this a national trend? Well, stay tuned right here on BRN Weekly. Imagine a new television network that will make you richer, healthier, and in control of your financial future. This network is for the policewoman in Nashville, Tennessee, the baker in Dubuque, Iowa, the teacher in Lexington, Kentucky. We want to make the idea of savings and retirement culturally relevant. But what do you see as a defining issue of the midterms? Especially for the smaller businesses. I mean, they are the lifeblood of the American economy. featuring exclusive interviews, current affairs, and docuseries. 33 years old, you retired early.
The philosophy is money only matters if it helps you live a life that you love.
But you got to start thinking about retirement as soon as you get in.
The Broadcast Retirement Network will drive very high engagement with premium partnerships. So this isn't retirement and savings for your parents or grandparents. This is for all Americans. And we're going to change the way you think about money. Welcome to the next frontier of retirement and savings. This is BRN, the Broadcast Retirement Network. Welcome back to the program. Well, the state of Delaware Attorney General's office recently announced a settlement with investment company Horace Mann regarding some bad broker behavior. I sat down with the treasurer of Delaware, Colleen Davis, to learn more. Let's take a look.
We were pretty integrally involved in the process. Back in 2016, the state of Delaware transitioned its 403B plan from a multi-vendor format, which was fairly confusing for a number of individuals involved. And we rolled that into a single vendor platform. In doing that, we selected Voya as our record keeper, and we actually were able to roll the 403B as well as the 457B and the 401A plans together. Mm-hmm. The great thing about that was it allowed our educators to benefit from the pricing services that they weren't otherwise able to access. And again, the decision to consolidate to one record keeper took us quite some time, and at that time was considered a very bold move. Yeah. And in 2016, we were recognized by the retirement services industry in the Plan Sponsor magazine. We were actually selected as a finalist for Plan Sponsor of the Year. Yeah. And so we were really excited about doing this. Unfortunately, during that time, there was a broker-dealer that operates in Delaware by the name of Horace Mann Investors. They actually had a representative by the name of Dieter Hoffman, and he was engaged in some dishonest and unethical practices at that time, which were in direct violation of our Delaware Securities Act. And truly, he was taking unfair advantage of our educators as we were transitioning from that multi-vendor platform to Voya, and really sort of targeted them unfairly. It was brought to our attention by one of my staff, Dan Kimmel, who's really phenomenal, extremely passionate. And he actually found that one of his retired teachers was a target of this unfair practice, and became really passionate about it. I mean, he's passionate to begin with, but when he heard that she was being targeted in this extremely unethical way, he started to sort of look around for other potential targets. And that was when we were getting some more information and started to turn it over to the Department of Justice for continued investigation of the group, the Horace Mann Investors, but more specifically Dieter Hoffman. And it was really that champion from my office that helped to really raise that red flag, and in conjunction with the Department of Justice, that sort of brought this all to fruition. And we're hopeful that we don't see this kind of practice continue, and really hopeful that we're making a statement that we're not going to accept this type of performance and or unethical treatment of our teachers. We do have a very strong finance arm here that big contribution to our overall GDP or GSP. And so, it's really fantastic when we're able to sort of identify that one outlier that's doing this type of thing, and really kind of rectify the situation. I will say it was an exhaustive RFP process. They did a lot of really wonderful work in setting up this plan through Voya, and they negotiated fees, into the late hours of the evening to ensure that we get the best rates and we get the best plan for not only our teachers but all of our state employees. And it feels like a big win when you go through an RFP process like that. But when you find that there are some people who rightfully, or wrongfully sometimes made a different choice, when you can identify that, one, we did the best we could, and two, we've helped people to get back on track and to avoid this type of unethical targeting. So it was a big win all around. As I said, one of the things that I wanted to really sort of highlight is our amazing staff. I mean, we had two individuals, as I said, Dan Kimmel, and our other was a gentleman by the name of Mike Green. And the two of them have been extremely passionate about ensuring that everyone is retiring securely from state employment, and again, that we're getting those best rates and fair treatment. So yeah, it was a great success, and we're still sort of trying to highlight that hard work that they've been dedicated to. And the Department of Justice has been really fantastic in helping us to resolve these investigations and trying to hold accountability.
And in our last segment, is this a national trend? Well, I sat down with the Wall Street Journal's Ann Tergerson to get her perspective on whether or not this could be impactful nationally. Let's take a look.
I think it's very interesting. Basically the Securities and Exchange Commission seems to be looking into 403B practices, which I think is really very interesting. SEC Chairman Jay Clayton has been on record saying he's concerned about, some aspects of these plans. And then in New York State, we saw that the New York State Insurance Department also launched an investigation of some of the insurance companies involved in this market. And now we're seeing Delaware take action. Is it something? Is it a sign of some kind of national crackdown? Well, I think the SEC investigation by itself is. It seems like these state actions, particularly the one in Delaware, was certainly something that was responding to a situation that arose there. I mean, in 403B, and you probably would know better than me. I mean, maybe in 457, where I feel like at least there's sort of a strong association, NAGDA, and maybe states like to look at what each other are doing. But in 403B, I feel like it's such a fragmented market. And what Delaware did here, I found was really very interesting. And I mean, I haven't done any kind of national kind of census of 403B plans, but I haven't seen this elsewhere. So I was really kind of fascinated by it. I mean, it would be great if it were to happen. I have to say, the market is definitely seems to me to be in need of some stricter kind of oversight. It would not be a bad thing. So, I mean, what Delaware did in consolidating to a single vendor for both the 457 and 403B plan, I mean, why not, right? You get the economies of scale that are enormously lacking in 403B. It's interesting in the Delaware case, it seemed like a very clear cause and effect that the 403B plan went from 13 vendors, which included Horace Mann, to one vendor, which was Voya, which was consolidated with the 457 plan. All of a sudden, those other 12, or I don't know, maybe Voya wasn't a pre-existing vendor. I don't know. You would know.
Yeah, I think they were. They
were. Okay, so those other 12 vendors, including Horace Mann, basically got cut out. And so the solution that this one broker who was affiliated with Horace Mann came up with was to convince, his clients who were teachers to open IRAs, fund those IRAs with, of course, Horace Mann annuities, and stop contributing to the 403B plan, which, is it's interesting because a lot of consumer advocates who say that they have clients or friends who have 403B plans with nothing but high cost kind of options that they don't believe is in the best interest of the consumer, that these people often advise them to open IRAs with a Vanguard or a Fidelity. But this is sort of taking that same thought process and turning it on its head and saying, hey, rather than rather than go into a 403B with low costs, please come to the IRA with so you can preserve my commissions. It's kind of mind-boggling to me how, within ERISA, within, for 401k plans under ERISA, you get this kind of strict accountability, and you get litigation when there's been a sense of potential violation. But, in this other world, it just seems like there's really no, at least in 403B, it seems like there's no, in some cases, no central fiduciary who's really watching out. The school districts aren't really embracing that role, and probably for obvious reasons, they don't want the liability, but nobody's really stepping in there. And you've seen litigation in the ERISA governed section of the 403B market. I'm not saying that litigation is a good thing, but it is a good thing to have a sense that there's somebody out there who could counteract potential abuses if they occur. And again, I'm not opining on what I think of the 403B litigation there, but I'm just saying that you do get those kind of checks and balances a little bit more when you have some kind of ERISA type of governance.
Well, great contributors, great segments, and great shows all around. And that wraps up this episode of BRN Weekly, but we're not done for the week, because tomorrow I'm joined by members of the media, academia, and financial services to discuss the issues related to retirement markets, technology, personal finance, and more on BRN Sunday podcast. You're going to want to check that out. So until then, I'm Jeff Snyder. Keep on saving, and don't forget, roll with the changes.
But if you're tired of the same